I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning, but it's not today.
Right.
You look at the calendar on your wall, and the date is September 1939.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and you pick up a newspaper, and something is just fundamentally, completely different about the timeline.
Right, the big shift.
The world simply does not go to war.
Wow.
There is no invasion of Poland. There was no blitz raining fire over London. No Pearl Harbor.
No Holocaust as we knew
Yeah,
it.
exactly. No atomic bombs falling from the sky.
I mean, it really represents the ultimate historical fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It's a complete divergence from the reality we actually understand and inhabit.
And at first glance, I mean, this alternate timeline sounds like humanity's greatest victory.
Oh, absolutely.
Because think about the immediate obvious result of that newspaper headline. You've got roughly 70 to 85 million lives that are just spared.
Right, the sheer numbers are staggering.
Families stay together. Entire cities aren't reduced to rubble and ash. The soldiers go home, or, they never deploy in the first place.
Yeah, they just live their lives.
It sounds like a perfect, peaceful utopia. Okay, let's unpack this.
Because it's not that simple.
Right, because we have a stack of notes and excerpts today from a truly fascinating source called Echoes of an Unfought War.
Yes, a really incredible text.
And our mission for this deep dive is to basically explore this and extract the most profound insights from this exact scenario.
Because the primary argument of this text suggests that this perceived utopia is actually a profound illusion.
Yeah, it's definitely an illusion.
Because history rarely offers, simple arithmetic where removing a negative automatically leaves a positive.
Right, it doesn't just zero out.
Exactly. Eliminating World War II from the timeline doesn't create some perfect vacuum of peace.
Wow.
It merely sets humanity on a highly unpredictable, completely alternative path.
Right, a totally different trajectory.
And the key to understanding this is looking at the political realities of 1939.
Because if war does not break out, those realities are just frozen in place.
Exactly. You are leaving some incredibly dark, authoritarian forces completely unchecked.
With their domestic power fully intact.
Yes.
Which brings us to the center of Europe. And I have to say, I really struggled with this part of the source material.
It's heavy.
It is. We have to discuss Nazi Germany. The text dives into the implications of peace for the Nazi regime, and I found myself just needing to pause.
Yeah, it's a difficult concept to grapple with.
Because, wait, are historians really suggesting the Holocaust might not have happened exactly as it did?
Well,
I mean, it feels almost dangerous to suggest that avoiding the war would fundamentally alter that. Is the author implying it wouldn't have happened at all?
no, they aren't saying that.
Because Nazi ideology, with all its violent anti-Semitism, was already deeply established by 1939. It was legislated.
Right, it was already law. And the source navigates this carefully because it is a subject of intense historical debate.
Okay.
To understand the argument, we really have to look at the actual mechanisms of the genocide.
Okay, the logistics of it.
Exactly. One major historical perspective argues that the incredibly rapid industrialized slaughter of millions of people emerged largely because of the specific conditions created by the war itself.
So the war was the catalyst.
The conflict provided a literal fog of war. It provided military occupation of vast territories in Eastern Europe.
Which gave them the physical space.
Yes, the space and the administrative cover to construct death camps completely away from the German public.
Ah, okay. So the argument is that without the chaos of a continental war, the regime remains confined to its pre-war borders.
Pretty much.
They don't have the cover of a massive global conflict to mask the logistics of, industrialized extermination.
Right. What's fascinating here is that the truth likely lies in a horrifying middle ground.
A middle ground.
Yeah. The immediate industrialized slaughter might not have materialized at the terrifying speed and scale that it did in our timeline.
Right.
Millions of lives might technically be saved from combat and extermination camps. However, the core ideology remains absolutely intact.
So the hate is still there. The policies are still there.
Exactly. State-sponsored oppression, extreme discrimination, forced deportations, the systemic stripping of rights, all of that would continue.
Wow.
The author points out that authoritarian control would have deeply rooted itself into the fabric of a peaceful Europe,
Just becoming normalized.
creating a slower, deeply insidious form of suffering that might have lasted for decades.
Because there's no allied force coming to dismantle it.
Precisely. No armies marching into Berlin.
It is a chilling concept to wrestle with. I mean, the immediate explosion of violence is avoided, sure, but the authoritarian structure is allowed to just ossify.
It legitimizes itself on the world stage.
And that brings up the ripple effects. We are looking at the macro-level survival of these regimes, but the source also pulls us down to the micro-level.
The everyday impact.
Yeah, the impact on everyday human lives and demographics. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, this part is mind-bending.
Because I want you, the person listening to this deep dive right now, to think about your own family tree, your own existence.
Right. We are talking about a demographic shift so massive, it completely overwrites modern history.
Because in our timeline, a whole generation of young men and women died on battlefields, in cities, in camps across the globe.
Billions of them.
But in this unfought war timeline, those 70 to 85 million people survive.
They get to live out their lives.
They become engineers, they become teachers, artists, politicians.
They become parents.
Exactly. And I was trying to conceptualize how this changes things, and the text made me think of it like the butterfly effect of real estate and societal infrastructure.
That's a good way to look at it. Consider the physical space and the economic roles those surviving millions would occupy.
That is exactly the mechanism. It isn't just that these people survive, it is that they occupy homes that, in our timeline, were left empty.
Right.
They take university seats and entry-level jobs that someone else eventually took in our world.
And think about the post-war migrations.
Oh, exactly. Like in our reality, say a refugee flees a destroyed European city.
Right.
They board a ship to New York, they get a job at a specific factory, and they meet their future spouse.
But if the war never happened,
That refugee stays in Warsaw or Paris. That meeting never happens.
the chain of causality that produced the current population of the Earth is entirely severed.
Meaning a world without World War II guarantees that we do not exist.
It's heavy to think about.
The listener tuning into this deep dive today does not exist.
Yeah, the specific combination of circumstances, the migrations, the chance encounters that led to our specific generation.
It's totally overwritten by the survival of that 1939 generation,
We are essentially trading our existence for theirs.
which is wild.
It really illustrates the profound interconnectedness of historical events.
Yeah.
Because those generations go on to live undisturbed lives, right? Working those jobs, filling those universities in a relatively stable environment.
Normal lives.
But society loses a specific, terrifying catalyst.
Oh, you mean the innovation side of things?
Yes, the desperate existential agency that drives rapid technological and medical innovation completely evaporates.
Right, the stalled engine of innovation. The text frames this as the dark price of peace.
It's a very steep price.
And we should explore the mechanics of how war actually accelerates technology. Because it isn't just about, scientists suddenly getting smarter.
No, not at all.
It is about the complete bypass of traditional bureaucracy.
Exactly. In peacetime, scientific advancement is very methodical.
Slow.
A researcher applies for a grant, they wait for funding, they conduct small-scale trials.
Submit to peer review.
And maybe a decade later, a product goes to market.
Maybe.
But when governments face literal annihilation, that entire process is just incinerated.
Thrown out the window.
Bureaucracy is replaced by a blank check. The government mandates that a problem be solved immediately, regardless of the cost or the failure rate.
I was reading this section on Alan Turing and computing,
Yeah.
and it perfectly highlights this bypass.
Oh, Turing is the perfect example.
Because Turing was a brilliant mathematician, sure. But in a peacetime scenario, his theories on computing machines might have just remained academic papers.
Right, just debated in university halls for decades.
But the existential threat of German U-boats starving Britain into submission.
That forced the military to pull Turing and others into Bletchley Park.
They didn't ask for a theoretical paper.
No, they demanded a physical machine capable of processing cryptographic permutations at speeds humanity had never seen.
And they provided unlimited resources to build it.
Exactly.
And the absolute necessity of cracking that Enigma code laid the physical and theoretical foundation for modern computer science.
It birthed the computer age.
Without that wartime urgency, the source argues that the incentive to fund massive room-sized experimental calculators just disappears.
There's no reason to build them.
So the timeline for computing stretches way out. Personal computers might not arrive until the early 21st century.
The modern internet as a tool for global communication doesn't exist yet.
The smartphone in your pocket. Science fiction.
The society basically remains in an extended analog era, perhaps resembling a high-tech version of the 1950s well into the new millennium.
Wow.
And this lack of urgent blank check funding extends far beyond just electronics.
Right.
It fundamentally impacts the human body and the medical field.
The medical paradox outlined in the source is honestly a bitter pill to swallow.
It really is.
Because the obvious victory is that millions avoid being torn apart by shrapnel.
Of course.
But the hidden tragedy is that everyday people back home end up waiting decades longer for life-saving treatments.
Yeah.
And the mechanism here is the logistics of mass manufacturing, particularly with antibiotics.
Let's talk about Alexander Fleming. He discovered penicillin in 1928.
Right, right before the war.
Exactly. And for over a decade, it remained largely a laboratory curiosity because it was incredibly difficult to produce in meaningful quantities.
Because peacetime pharmaceutical companies didn't see the immediate profit in figuring out how to mass produce it.
There was no urgent market demand.
But then the war breaks out. The U.S. government realizes infections will kill more soldiers than bullets.
Always the case in historical conflicts.
So they essentially force over 20 different chemical and pharmaceutical companies to share research and scale up production for D-Day.
They collaborate forcefully.
They figure out deep tank fermentation basically overnight.
The logistical miracle of mass-producing penicillin, along with breakthroughs in blood plasma transport, trauma care, reconstructive surgery,
All of it.
it was entirely driven by the daily arrival of thousands of shattered bodies requiring immediate solutions.
Right. And without that grim supply of casualties forcing the medical system to adapt, the progress becomes agonizingly slow.
It crawls.
The text points out the devastating trade-off. Millions avoid the battlefield, sure, but an average citizen in 1965 might die of a routine bacterial infection.
A simple scrape.
Yeah, something that in our timeline would have been easily cured by a $5 prescription at the local pharmacy.
Because the pressure to innovate is absent. And this lack of pressure doesn't just delay our hospitals and our communications. It alters the trajectory of global weaponry.
Which in turn drastically changes the geopolitical map.
Exactly.
I kept returning to the chapter on global power dynamics. If the war doesn't happen, does the United States ever even build the atomic bomb?
It's a huge question.
Or does the whole concept of nuclear fission, which was discovered right before the war, just sit in a filing cabinet as theoretical physics?
Well, the Manhattan Project was driven by a very specific terror.
Right.
The intelligence that Nazi Germany was pursuing a nuclear weapon.
That fear of being beaten to the punch.
The United States poured unfathomable resources into the desert, constructing entire secret cities.
Because they believed the alternative was literally the end of the world.
Exactly. Without the war, that race never begins. Nuclear physics advances slowly, academically.
So the bomb might not be developed until the 1960s or 1970s.
If at all.
Which means there are no images of mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There is no visceral, shared global trauma of seeing a city vaporized in an instant. Humanity doesn't immediately grasp its own capacity for self-annihilation.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Okay.
the absence of that weapon in 1945 means the absence of the Cold War bipolarity.
Oh, wow.
In our timeline, the Cold War emerged from the ashes of World War II. Europe was devastated.
Right, in ruins.
The Soviet Union expanded into the resulting vacuum in Eastern Europe, and the United States, largely untouched by infrastructure damage, emerged as an economic juggernaut.
Right. Two superpowers, armed with nuclear weapons, locked in a standoff.
But in the unfought war timeline, Britain, France, and Germany are never economically or militarily ruined.
Their treasuries aren't empty to pay for thousands of tanks and bombers.
Cities aren't leveled.
So they retain their status as massive industrial global empires.
Right.
We don't get a world split cleanly between Washington and Moscow.
No, we get a multipolar world.
And the source goes deep into the mechanics of what a multipolar world means for colonialism, which is pretty grim.
A multipolar world of the 1950s and 60s would be heavily defined by the violent continuation of colonial empires.
Because the economic realities of empire are brutal. In our timeline, Britain and France were practically bankrupt by 1945.
They had nothing left.
They simply lacked the military capacity and the financial capital to maintain their grip on the global South. Exhaustion forced decolonization.
Exactly.
But if Britain isn't bankrupted by the Blitz and the war effort, they maintain the financial leverage to dictate global trade.
They possess a well-rested, fully funded military apparatus capable of suppressing independence movements.
Right.
The timeline for Indian independence could be delayed by decades.
Wow.
African liberation movements would face entrenched, economically stable colonial masters rather than weary, war-torn administrators.
So the entire map of the modern world, the borders we recognize, the national identities of dozens of sovereign nations, they are structurally locked out of development.
Yes.
The source makes it clear that the colonial powers would continue to extract wealth to fund their own domestic growth, entirely altering the economic balance of the 20th century.
The hierarchy of the early 20th century is just preserved and fortified.
Locked in.
And because that hierarchy remains unchallenged by a global catastrophe, the way humanity cooperates internationally shifts entirely.
Which brings us to the formation of modern global institutions.
Right.
The United Nations, the Geneva Conventions, the modern frameworks for international human rights.
None of these were born out of a gentle, evolving desire for global harmony.
No. They were born directly from the trauma of the Holocaust and the destruction of the war.
Nations looked into the abyss of their own extinction, and they decided to build a structural fence.
Right. The mechanism of international law requires a massive shock to the system to force sovereign nations to willingly surrender some of their autonomy.
If you never look into the abyss, you never see the urgent need for the fence. Without the war, international law develops at a glacial pace. Human rights protections lack the absolute moral urgency that followed the liberation of the camps.
So instead of a unified global assembly, countries continue to rely on the precarious 19th century-style secret treaties.
And traditional military alliances that defined the years before 1939.
And the economic landscape reflects this fragmentation too. There is no destroyed Europe, which means there is no American Marshall Plan to rebuild it.
Right.
The United States never achieves its post-1945 total global economic dominance because its primary competitors are still industrial powerhouses operating at full capacity.
It creates a leveling of the global playing field among the great powers, but it does so in a way that actually stifles global integration.
And this lack of global integration ripples right down into the culture and the way we explore the universe.
Oh, the cultural shifts are fascinating.
The source touches on how art and literature would shift. Perhaps detective novels and localized dramas dominate the mid-century instead of sweeping existential war epics.
Because societal anxieties are smaller and less apocalyptic.
Yeah. But the cultural loss that stood out the most in the text was the total stalling of the space race.
Because space exploration is fundamentally tied to the mechanics of weapons delivery.
Exactly. The rockets that eventually carried human beings into space didn't start as vessels of scientific curiosity.
They did not.
They were repurposed intercontinental ballistic missiles. The technology evolved directly from wartime programs like the V-2 rocket.
Yeah.
And the sole reason the United States pushed so aggressively to land on the moon was the bitter ideological rivalry of the Cold War.
It was a proxy battle to prove technological superiority over the Soviets.
Right.
Without the foundation of wartime missile development, and without the subsequent Cold War rivalry demanding a display of ultimate high-ground dominance.
The journey beyond Earth's atmosphere just loses its financial backing.
If you don't need to figure out how to drop a nuclear payload halfway across the world, you don't build a Saturn V rocket.
Right. There is no moon landing in 1969. The deployment of satellites is delayed for decades. That means no GPS navigation.
No global weather forecasting.
No instantaneous global communications network.
Humanity remains quite literally grounded, looking up at stars that are suddenly much further away.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at the mechanisms of stalled technology, the preservation of colonial empires, the delayed mass production of medicines,
and the lack of urgent global cooperation.
The synthesis of all these points leads to an uncomfortable truth at the core of the source material.
Erasing World War II from the timeline does not erase humanity's inherent capacity for conflict.
No, it doesn't.
We might remove that specific massive detonation, but the underlying friction remains.
Nationalism still exists. Economic crises still occur. Territorial disputes between a still powerful Germany and a growing Soviet Union are boiling under the surface.
Right.
The demands of colonial subjects for freedom will inevitably clash with the empires trying to contain them.
The world likely trades one massive singular explosion for a century of smaller, protracted, and still devastating fires. This raises an important question.
Okay.
Did this alternate timeline truly make the world a better, safer place, or did it merely trade one set of catastrophic tragedies for a different, more prolonged set of struggles?
And it forces us to confront the ultimate historical paradox.
Which is?
The events we wish with all our hearts had never occurred. The events that caused unimaginable suffering, they often served as the violent catalyst for the modern world.
They did.
The 21st century we inhabit today, our instant communications, our medical lifespans, the map of independent nations, our international human rights framework.
All of it.
It was forged directly in the absolute ashes of humanity's darkest chapter.
Because out of unimaginable destruction came the mechanical push for scientific breakthroughs.
A financial exhaustion that led to decolonization.
And a renewed, documented commitment to preventing such devastation again, regardless of how imperfect that commitment has been in practice.
Exactly. History is not just a ledger of victories and defeats. It is a complex engine of cause and consequence.
It really is.
And the text leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought to mull over long after you finish listening today.
It's a big one.
If humanity's greatest leaps in medicine, in technology, in social organization, and in international human rights,
Yeah.
if those massive leaps only occurred because we were pushed to the absolute brink of self-destruction, what does that actually say about our nature?
Right.
Are we fundamentally incapable of reaching our highest potential without an existential threat breathing down our necks?
It is a question that challenges our entire perception of human progress.
It demands that we look closely at how we motivate ourselves.
Absolutely.
So tomorrow, when you wake up and you look around at the smartphone on your desk, at the mass-produced antibiotics in your cabinet, at the political map of the world,
Remember that the architecture of our reality is never clean.
no. We are living in a structure built directly on the echoes of the choices we made when the world did go to war.
Powerful stuff.
Keep questioning the world around you. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.